Good day, everybody. It's your old buddy, Dirty Pat Walsh. And I'm here at Trent Radio with Rochelle.
Hi, Pat. Hi, friends.
And with Wes.
Okay.
And these are the Trent Radio people I was discussing earlier today in my early morning vlog. But we've been talking about, I'm completely ignorant to events concerning academia and such, but I'm all for worker solidarity and striking and things like that. And I guess there was just a big teacher strike, so it's obviously affected Rochelle and Wes. So maybe I'm just going to set the camera here and you guys can talk about it for a second. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, maybe I'll make some quick intro comments about what's been going on with the strike overall, and then let Wesley, as a student, kind of take over from there. So we just actually did a little piece on Trent Radio talking about how students are going to be going back to classes and how this is happening as a result of back to work legislation, and how that whole dynamic is entirely toxic and is entirely, a divide and conquer modality that pits students against laborers, and often, devoid in this conversation is the actual real responsibilities, not only of the institutions, but of those who fund them, so the governments of the day. And so we've been talking about how difficult it is going to be as a transition for students who've been off for 5 weeks already to move back into a place of trying to get through the rest of the semester in a very small amount of time. It's a super compressed amount of time that people are going to have to learn in. Students are having to stay till just days before the holidays begin to try to get stuff in. We've also been talking a little bit about the class nature of what this looks like, right? And for students that are low income, have been receiving OSAP, this world is a little bit more messy, and the government's offering this $500, up to $500 amount of money to compensate students that have been screwed over by this 5-week strike. But it's looking like that money is never going to actually end up in the hands of people if you actually do get an allotment. And, we're also thinking a little bit today about the particularities around international students, right? So as I always like to, when things are happening in the community, I like to kind of link them back to greater power dynamics. And so racialization, class, these things really deeply impact every day, all the time. But when it comes to something like a student strike, people who don't have a lot of social power are particularly extra screwed, right? And so Wes was just sharing that at the end of a 5-week break from being a student, all savings are run out, and now with a full extra workload, you're going to have to go back to school, and you need a job so that you can buy groceries, right?
Yeah,
so
no.
That sucks. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's pretty tricky. So on October 16th, most of the colleges, at least all of the provincially funded, like the ones where the union is a part of them in Ontario, went on strike. For a number of reasons, one of them being most of the instructing faculty, most of the teachers were made to be part-time, and so that they wouldn't have to get benefits, and part-time on a contract basis too. So you would really only have 3 or 4 months of job security. You'd work part-time hours, you wouldn't get any benefits, you wouldn't know if you'd still have a job next semester, you certainly wouldn't know if you still have a job next year. There's no job security, so the whole time you're trying to work as an educator and teach people, in some cases, really important stuff. Like there are nursing students here. There are contractors who are going to be building buildings that need to be safe. Right? There's a lot of really important things, and other educators. I'm in the educational support program, so we have a lot of instructors. Not necessarily specifically in my case, but I'm speaking generally about the students. Student body here, who are being taught by instructors who are distracted by the fact that they don't know if they're still going to have a job. They're not getting the support they need in order to teach people effectively, which we need as a society. We need people that are properly trained for the things they want to do. So in order to alleviate these problems, the union went on strike. Because they were clearly being exploited by their employers and the people that fund their employers. However, during the entire strike, my understanding is that the administration completely stonewalled the union, refused to budge on anything. would offer like insulting compromises to the union that barely moved anything at all. So the strike continued, because why would you strike for nothing, right? And this whole time, I didn't really mind being a bargaining chip, because I did believe in the reason for the strike. I wasn't frustrated with the instructors, the union, for going on strike, because that made sense. I was frustrated with the administration for stonewalling them, and I was really frustrated with the province, because they're really the ones who most of the funding comes from. They don't want to spend extra money, right? They were certainly on the side of the institutions in all of this. So, in the end, it really comes down to a educators versus provincial government kind of situation. I think once you follow the structure of everything, and to have that end just last week, just this weekend, really, this last weekend, in back to work legislation by the Ontario government, is really the people at the top of the thing being like, nah, that strike was for nothing. You got to go back to work now, and so now all of these students have to go back to school now, and try to learn everything in a condensed way. So the college is going to measure whether or not they've taught their students based on the learning outcomes that are in the syllabi, in the course outlines. That doesn't necessarily actually reflect the actual information that you need to be successful at your job. So the college goes like, oh, well, we got all these learning outcomes, we successfully taught everybody in this condensed period, but if you're a nursing student, there might be some contingencies of medical emergencies that you haven't been trained on because it wasn't enough time, but they met the learning outcomes, so you still learned everything. Or if you're some kind of contractor, there might be important safety things. Or if you're going to be an educational assistant, there might be ways of working with younger students that I'm not aware of because we didn't have enough time to cover it. But on paper, the education was there, so the credit's there, so it's fine. So, and I'm not blaming the faculty for going on strike, but the narrative that I think we need to be aware of that's being construed is that they're going to create a narrative where this back-to-work legislation was pro-student. And that the teachers were anti-students. But what's really going on is this was anti-student and this is anti-teacher. This is anti-education that this is happening. The reason that I had no classes for so long, I was on strike so long, was not because the educators who are laborers who are being exploited chose to go on strike and chose to advocate for themselves. It's because the people that control their paychecks and their livelihoods were refusing to budge. And further up the chain. And so I guess the takeaway I would like to don't let anyone tell you that this back to work legislation was a pro-student decision, because it absolutely was not. Maybe in some ways it kind of it gets students back into class and it lets people sort of keep their lives on track a little bit more. But the reason that we were impacted so much as students was not because of the people that went on strike. It was because of the people that refused to budge, that kept the strike going on for so long. Because even though there's so much provincial money going into education, and it's not like these are all private schools. Really, there's still a class thing going on. There's still it's still a profit-driven thing. There's still owners of means of production, and there's people that are doing the actual labor, and the people that are making money off of that labor. It's the same thing that you see everywhere.
Well, and we were saying earlier, right? Students are workers.
Yeah.
Their job is to go and get that education, and so trying to create a false sense of division between workers and workers.
Yeah.
The division is between government and funders and workers, right?
Yeah.
And so let's keep that clear as the days go on, and remember that students and educators are on the same side, which is having a knowledgeable human capacity to be in the industries that we need to have working so that we have the kind of world that we want to live in.
Make no mistake, the biggest reason for the faculty going on strike, for the union deciding to do this strike, was because it was impacting our education as students. Because the lack of job security and as an educator was affecting the education we were getting as students. So fixing that is what was going to be the pro-student thing, not just putting us back to class so we get the credits. So we'd like, okay, no, you're trained now, you got the learning outcomes, you can go back now. But like, we didn't get the same education, and we were never going to get the education that we really deserved, that we were really paying for. Like, I get that I took out a loan from the government to be able to go to school. That's because it's incredibly expensive, and like, just because I didn't pay it up front doesn't mean I'm not paying it later. I'm going to feel that debt burden for a long time.
And the government told you you don't get a future unless you pay up and borrow from them and go get this experience of higher education, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's still not seen as much of an option to either go to college or university, right? And so long as we're pitting workers against people who need to get trained to be workers, we're screwed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Shit.
We're screwed.
Well, as a completely non-academic high school dropout who took neither option of college or university, I see it as not only bullshit, but dangerous bullshit. You know what I mean? So, thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Wes. And, yeah, a little bit of insight from the good people at Trent Radio on the current state of the union here. Have a good day. Be well.